Hello, hello, hello. A very good evening, and thank you very much for your company thus far. My friends, what a week it's been. Well, actually, it's been more than a week because I haven't actually been on a live stream this year yet. So, thank you very much to the team who took over yesterday. Alex Armstrong, by the way, has decided that he's too famous now. He's on GB News more than the adverts. So, I've said to him he can have a night off because he's on GB News tomorrow, you see. So, he will be back next week, mark my words. But my friends, thank you very much to Chloe Dobbs for running the ship over Christmas, because I was on GB News more than the adverts over Christmas. And Chloe kept Reasoned going and she kept pumping out brilliant content. She is an absolute superstar and I'm intensely grateful to her and for her. Well, do you know what? I will congratulate and shake her mother's hand whenever I meet her. I will. She's done a fine job. One of the comments there says, Michael says, I remember in the 1980s we weren't even allowed to hear Gerry Adams's voice. It was dubbed. He says, Chloe might be too young to remember, but the boys might remember. Michael, I was born in 1993. I mean, good Lord, I haven't had that rough a paper round, have I? I know the Electoral Commission trial, that was a bit of a long, drawn-out, horrible cesspit of despair. But hey, I don't think I've aged that badly. Right, anyway, listen, we've got absolutely tons to talk about tonight. We're going to be discussing what's just broken tonight as far as this deal that's been agreed, at least in principle, between Hamas and the State of Israel. We'll be discussing Shia Terror getting rid of electoral voter ID, getting rid of, well, actually allowing the franchise to be extended not just to 16-year-olds, but also to millions of foreign nationals. And as well as that, cancelling the local elections come May in large swathes of the country. You know, is this the sign of a man who is going to cling on to power like baby you have never seen before? The one thing that's got my goat, I mentioned Gerry Adams there, but he may well be getting a cheque signed by His Majesty's government, and it makes me feel sick to the pit of my stomach. I've not felt like this irate about something in all of 2 minutes. No, I joke. In a wee while, honestly, it turns my stomach like you wouldn't believe. I mean, my ancestors are from. If you go back, I'm talking some time, but if you go back, my ancestors are from Ulster, and I feel a deep affiliation with the place, and it makes me feel sick. The idea that the British taxpayer would be handing over money to what I deem to be a cancer on the body politic of the British state. And there are links that I'll get onto later on in the recording. But I want to start off, though, in my dispatch by talking to you about what I see as the link between the Chagosian so-called deal, I call it a surrender. 9 billion quid, by the way, has been proposed as compensation for us giving up an island. I mean, I don't know about you. It's a bit like walking into, I don't know, a supermarket and saying, giving them the goods that they are going to sell, and also giving them a cash upfront to sell it. It does not make sense. It is a surrender document if ever I've seen one. So we'll discuss all of those things. But I think this is about law, rule by lawyers. Shia Terror is ultimately a lawyer. And I think this is what we're seeing. Rule by technocracy, rule by lawyers. And it is deeply, deeply troubling because democracy is the one that's suffering here. And national interest as well. I don't give a flying flamingo what some international lawyer thinks. Anyway, I'll shut my gob and I'll get on with it, shall I? I'll explain to you what I make of these two things and why I think the two are incredibly linked and married when it comes to Shia, and explains the man himself. Well, my friends, it's official. Shia Terror's Britain puts everybody else first, just not you. Your granny, she's shivering at home because there's no cash to fix the boiler or power her home. The potholes outside, they're big enough to swallow a bus. But don't worry. Sir Keir Starmer, well, he's got his mitts on the money. Billions for Mauritius, millions for Gerry Adams, because that's their idea of priorities in the sphere of human rights. First up, the Chagos Islands. For over 200 years, those islands have been British. But now, Starmer's desperate to hand them over to Mauritius faster than you can say, well, what about the national interest, Sir Keir? He's even offering to pay billions to them. 9 billion quid is the reported figure I saw yesterday to lease back Diego Garcia, a key US airbase. Now, Trump's team are totally against it. They'll veto it at the first opportunity. Of that, I've no doubt. So, my friends, once again, we are here in Britain on these islands, desperate for the Americans to step in and help us out. And China's loving this. The British taxpayer, though, well, we're not loving it. We're footing the bill for Starmer's constant surrender. Why does it feel that Labour's more interested in being pals with Mauritius, cozying up to the Chinese? Rachel Reeves was there, whilst the economy that she has managed to screw up at record pace is going down the Swanee. And she's out there shaking hands with the Chinese second in command over protecting Britain. It's the same with this Mauritian deal. And then there's Gerry Adams. And hand on heart, this makes me feel sick to the pit of my stomach. He's a man whose name will be forever tied to the Irish Republican Army's terror. Note, I didn't say the Irish Republican Army, because I don't want to get sued. They are an incredibly litigious political party, but the facts are, in the 1970s, Gerry Adams was detained for suspected involvement in terrorism, tried to escape, and he was landed in prison. You fast forward to today, and Starmer's reversing a law that stopped Adams, and hundreds like him, by the way, all of them, if you ask me, on the wrong side of history, as much as the Irish romanticisation campaign may tell you otherwise. But to stop hundreds like them pocketing taxpayer-funded compensation. All this, by the way, whilst IRA victims on mainland Britain haven't received a penny. But Labour want to pay out to a man linked to decades of violence in Northern Ireland, and let's not forget, in GB as well. I'd be less livid. I honestly, and I mean this, I'd be less livid if Starmer wrote a cheque to Shamima Begum than writing one to Gerry Adams. At least she didn't come back demanding a bloody refund. But what links these two? Why, you might be thinking, Darren, you're going off on a tangent here. Why are you trying to link these two things? I see this as Labour's obsession with human rights, with an obsession with appeasing absolutely everyone except the people who matter, i.e. the British public. They'll hand over your hard-earned money to Mauritius and Gerry Adams while telling you that there's nothing left in the kitty for your grand's heating bill or fixing up your kid's school. So common sense, well, it's been well and truly thrown out the window in Starmer's Britain, more obsessed with multilateral organisations, these international quangos, than it actually is the British national interest. So the key question I pose is pretty simple. Whose side are the Labour Party on? Because it doesn't look like it's ours in any good faith interpretation. Next time you're counting your pennies, out at the supermarket, inflation has come down 0.1%, but it's still up 2.5%. Your broadband and everything else is going to go up come April. Or next time you're even stuck in an NHS queue, you've got people waiting an hour in an ambulance just to get into an NHS corridor, not to be seen in accident and emergency. Wait, next time that happens to you, just remember this. Starmer's found plenty of money for everybody else. You can sod your human rights, Sir Keir, International obligations be damned. Backslapping the world's elite, I couldn't give a flying flamingo. I find both of these decisions, Gerry and the Chagos, utterly repulsive. But I do find them telling. I do find them instructive. I do find them illuminating. Whoever this man is working for in the form of Sakir, it ain't the British nation. Well, I honestly haven't been this sort of... It feels like a clarifying moment. It feels like... I'm looking in the wrong bloody camera, that would help. It feels like a clarifying moment. It feels like we are seeing the man for who he is, if we hadn't already, right? If we hadn't on day one, when he said he was going to screw all over the farmers. And by the way, he's just brought in a new pensions minister who says he wants to scrap the triple lock on pensions. So if you're a pensioner out there right now, things could get even worse, believe it or not, for you out there, because you're all millionaire pensioners. It's an absurdity. And it's instructive. It's globalists ahead of the national interest. He doesn't give a damn about national sovereignty. I actually remember one quote by Theresa May, and it was written by Nick Timothy, who now happens to be a Conservative MP. And she said in 2017, at the 2017 Conservative Party conference, she said, "If you are a citizen of the world, you are a citizen of nowhere." And that stayed with me, actually. And I think it very much describes the politics of Sir Keir Starmer. I really do. It tells you everything that you need to know. Right, anyway, listen, enough of my yapping. I want to get on my panel. As I said, Chloe Dobbs, who's been holding the fort valiantly and brilliantly and beautifully since I took some time off over... Well, I didn't take some time off over Christmas, but you know what I mean. I wasn't here. And... Connie Shaw, who has been leading a crusade in the name of common sense and against censorship on university campuses. And she's known her fair share of said censorship, despite her very young years. And Will Kingston, not so young, but, my favourite Willie, if ever there was one, and I am a man who's partial to a Willie now and then. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So I have got a fantastic panel. As I say, Alex Armstrong is off gallivanting tonight and he's on air on GB News tomorrow, so you'll see him on more than the adverts at the moment. But let's get on that panel who are waiting patiently in the grotto. Hello, hello, hello. I'm in the wrong camera again. I've got to get used to this. Oh, get in.
How which way it is.
Yes, yeah, dance. I'm making you dance. Right, everyone, how is everyone?
Straight in with the Willie jokes. Poor Will.
Oh, well, it's all he's good for. It's all he's good for.
The funny thing, Chloe, is that Darren said he was partial to a Willie every now and then, and I think that's overstating how often he actually gets a Willie, but we'll put that to one side. Darren, one thing I would like to pick up on, which was from Kelly, which was saying that this was a pre-record from your earlier intro. And I think what she was getting at is that there is a really big difference in the shade of brown between one camera and the other.
Yeah, that's just a different camera.
Yeah, well, you go at the moment you're looking quite Chagossian, and then if you go straight into the lens, you go back to your usual Newcastle pale self. So I don't think it's a pre-record. I just think there's a weird, odd disparity in the way in your tannage between the two cameras.
That's a good camera. That is a less good camera. That's the moral of that story. Right, what did you think about getting off my dodgy Geordie tan? What do you think about what I had to say there? Because I do think it's instructive. Both of those things together. I think this is ruled by lawyers.
Who wants to go first?
Will.
Darren,
Sorry, I was aiming that at Will.
I'd say a couple of things. I think the way you framed it around this is, a human rights thing is only partially true. I think this is more that self-flagellating instinct that has infected Western governments, not just in the UK, but across the Western world.
But hang on. What I mean by that is he is using human rights. He is cloaking human rights around this in order to actually implement, in policy terms, the kind of self-flagellating "I hate Britain" policies that you mention, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but who is he trying to convince? You know, the average person on the street is not a human rights lawyer. The average person on the street sees 60 islands being given away and over $9 billion being given away to a poxy, piddling little African nation that is currently bullying what was once the greatest country in the world. And the average person on the street goes, what in the hell is going on? Like, I don't even think the most diehard lefty can look at this and go, like, this is right. And it makes you wonder when you're giving away money to the IRA and to Mauritius, and then, you know, you're dealing with ticket touts, and then you're kind of going off about AI in your spare time. When there are serious problems in this country right now, like, who is advising these people, and how in the hell are they thinking about their priorities? Because for me, it's a combination of depressing and baffling, and it drives you to drink. It is absolutely extraordinary.
It does. I imagine I am drinking a hell of a lot more since July of last year than I am right now. By the way, Paul says, nice tan, Darren. Have you been over to see Trump? So I'm doing well from the off. And one of the comments I did want to pick up on was this one, Chloe, from Sandy, who says, and Sandy, God bless her, says, I wish we could stop this man now. He's causing me so much anxiety. And Chloe, that's a sentiment that I'm hearing expressed a hell of a lot.
I presume she's talking about Starmer and not you, Darren.
Yes, I assume so. I assume so. Sandy can let us know, but I assume so.
Yeah, I mean, Will, you're right to ask who the hell is advising these people. I mean, their approval ratings are just plummeting and plummeting. We've just had that YouGov poll come out showing that Farage and the Reform Party are looking pretty close to overtaking the Labour Party. And yet every single thing they do just seems to be absolutely ridiculous and extremely unpopular. Like, who thinks that these things are going to please the British public? They live in some sort of bubble. They are driven by ideology rather than common sense. I mean, this whole Hamas Deal thing, it's, David Lammy saying, oh, we've got to decolonize the world. And it's like, okay, well, you're handing these islands to Mauritius. It's not like the Mauritians are the natives in the Chagos Islands. It was an island that didn't have people on it, and then the French had rule over it for a little while, and now we've got hold of it. But handing it to Mauritius just makes absolutely no sense. But David Lammy absolutely loves this. David Lammy, I'm sure, will continue to ask that we give money to the Caribbean nations for, our horrible crimes of colonization. The West just absolutely hates itself at the moment. It's absolutely ridiculous. And at a time when you have got people completely just unable to get an NHS appointment, waiting months and months, people pulling their own teeth out, people on trolleys in corridors for 50 hours at a time. And we've just had this big scare in the markets. We've got all this turmoil, meaning that the cost of borrowing is going to go up, and we're potentially going to need to find an extra 9 to 12 billion quid, right? To then find out, we're just going to hand 9 billion quid to Mauritius to give them islands and to hand away a key military base. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. It's a disaster. We're now hearing, we're maybe heading back to the days of austerity, even though Rachel Reeves said there will be no austerity under this government. How on earth can you justify to the British public handing 9 billion quid to Mauritius? It is bonkers. But the good news is now that Mauritius have said they are not happy with the deal and they want to do more negotiations, exactly. And it's probably not going to happen until Trump is in. Trump is just going to say, go do one. This is absolutely bonkers. So fingers crossed it's not going to happen.
So once again, Britain's relying upon the Americans.
Yeah, Chloe, can I just pick up on, you said that this is unpopular, and I agree with you. I don't mind unpopular decisions if they are ultimately in the national interest. Sometimes politicians have to make unpopular decisions and then make the case for why they are the right thing to do. It's the fact that these are so evidently unpatriotic decisions. Like, for people who haven't see me on TV or whatever before, I'm obviously Australian. I'm not British, but I came to this country because I've got a deep respect and love for British culture, for British history, for the values of this country. I consider myself incredibly grateful to be here. I think I'll be here for the rest of my life. I'll never go for England in the Ashes, but I love this country. I can only imagine how much this must hurt someone who was born in this country, who loves this country, and you see your territory being given away, and you see your money being given away to terrorists. Like it must be absolutely soul destroying.
It is. It very much is. Connie, the point here, you consider the Chagossians themselves, some of whom are in Britain, and they're saying, well, we don't want this deal either. So it's appeasement to say, look, we're following international law. We're absolutely phenomenal, aren't we? The greatest human rights lawyers you've ever seen. Britain is bad. Britain's past is bad, inherently bad, evil, inherently evil. Let's follow David Whammy Lammy, and say, actually, it's a sensible thing to do to hand over reparations.
I mean, you're all right. I agree with nearly everything that three of you have already said, and it is astonishing. And I agree with your point, Will. Like, who is advising Starmer? Because it's like he has, like, when you look at him as a man, he doesn't seem like, if you just met him as a normal guy and he wasn't the prime minister, you'd never think that he had, a bad bone in his body. And it's like he has the right intention, but every decision he makes, he manages to not only upset one area of people, but there are people throughout every section of society, whether that's people who want to spend money on their children's education, people who can't afford to even heat their homes. He has upset people up and down the country, whether it's to do with economics and being able to just afford basic things, or to afford what you used to be able to afford, or whether it's very simple, such as just having the right to express your opinion. It seems like he has got his finger in hundreds of different pies and upset everyone he possibly could. I mean, obviously, I'm only 20. I haven't been as engaged in politics ever than I am now, but I never thought growing up that this would be what it would like. This is what it is. I never thought it would be like this. When I was of a voting age, the first general election that I could vote in, and this is what I have been given.
Exactly. And, he said...
Connie,
He said, hang on, Will. He said yesterday, he stood up and he said, he gave a 20-minute speech on how he wants the United Kingdom to be an AI superpower. I thought, the only reason you're saying that, mate, and by the way, how are you going to power this AI superpower? Because data centers require a hell of a lot of energy, and you have just killed the energy golden goose in the form of North Sea oil and gas, and nuclear ain't going to come online for decades. So how are you going to power this stuff? But I thought, well, hang on, maybe it's because he's going hell for leather on AI and saying we need to champion AI and diverge from the EU, which I was heartened by, and I'll get onto that in a second. But I thought maybe it's because he is just an android himself, Robo Starmer. He just wants AI because then he'll rule forever and ever and ever. So I actually disagree with you, Connie, and I say on the fact that he is a good man. I don't think he is a good man. I think he is an operator, a ruthless operator. I think he doesn't care about the people that the Labour Party purport to care about. He was willing to say to 17.4 million people that their vote didn't matter and ought not have mattered, and that their vote for Brexit, the biggest for anyone or anything, ought to be completely ignored, sidelined, and all the rest of it. And also, he dismissed as a far-right bandwagon concerns about little girls being murdered or concerns about a whole host of other things.
The reason why I don't believe that he is inherently evil is because, like you say, he is so plastic that it is like he is blindly following extremely bad advice. Because he seems to not have any personality of his own, I can't believe the things that he's doing are of his own making, in the sense that even if he was doing good things, I wouldn't believe that they were his ideas, because he's just the most cardboard man ever.
I'll agree that a lot of the time, him making bad decisions, I think, can be just because, to be honest, he is a bit thick, rather than him being ill-intentioned. But I think more and more I am starting to see through the cracks and think this is someone who is more interested in protecting his own reputation than doing the right thing. And I think for me, everything that's happened with the grooming gangs has shown that to me very clearly. This is another case where he's shown himself to be completely out of touch with the public. We've got polling saying, 76% of the public want a national inquiry, and he has the audacity to stand up there and just say, oh, the ICSA report's fine, the ICSA's report is fine, even though we've pointed out clear as day to him many times that did not cover the grooming gang issues that we are talking about, and he knows that. Okay, he's not that stupid. He knows that, but he is more interested in covering his own arse and the arse of everyone in the Labour Party that would be implicated by such a report at the expense of the well-being of young girls in this country. That, for me, I'm sorry, but I do not think he's a good person after that.
Victoria says Brexit was a joke. We are still in the EU in all but name. But the point is, Victoria, that he wanted there to be absolutely nothing. He wanted to actually override democracy and say that the referendum was illegitimate. He came after people like me. He was part of all of those pushes through the court system and all the rest of it, the skullduggery that took place. So I don't see him as a good person, Will. I just don't.
Yeah, Darren, can I pick up on what we've just heard? I had the same view of Chloe and Connie in that initially I thought he was just a bit of a nothingy, bit thick kind of technocrat. And I think this is the mistake that we are making on the right. I don't think he's dumb. He's obviously got to a fairly high point in the law. He's not dumb. And I am increasingly thinking that he's not just a kind of nothingy technocrat. Peter Hitchens, who I know, Darren, you don't like, but I think he's done some really good work exposing Starmer's early history. And I think this guy, there is a good argument to say that underneath the technocrat exterior, he is a bigger radical than a Jeremy Corbyn, except he's smart enough to hide it underneath the robotic, boring, kind of suit exterior. If you actually look at what's going on, like, stop and just have a think about what we're talking about. Giving money to IRA terrorists, handing off islands and paying small little African nations to do so, lifting taxes in the first budget. Like, this is not a technocratic moderate that we're talking about. This is not a Blairite.
And lock people up in prison for tweets.
Exactly. This is this is not a Blairite. And don't get me wrong, I think the problems in the UK we're seeing now started with Blair, but this is not a Blairite. I think this is something unlike what we've seen. I think this is closer to Corbyn than Blair, and I think it's very dangerous for us to say, oh, well, he's a nothing guy in a suit. This is a much more dangerous proposition than that, and we really need to be very, very wise to it.
We do. I mean, by the way, I don't dislike Peter Hitchens, but I just find him so... I am one of life's hope for, well, you plan for the worst but hope for the best. And actually someone that we're all very involved with on this channel said to me, I'm very Jewish in my outlook in the world, as in I'm a pessimist, but I do hope for the best. And whereas Peter Hitchens, in my eyes, is just completely... He makes me feel miserable as sin. He makes me want to jump off Beachy Head. Like, it's just, I can't read his columns. I can't. It just makes me despair. And I don't want any more despair.
He's been right on this issue. He's been right on this issue, I think.
He has. And he voted Conservative for that reason. He held his nose and he voted Conservative for that reason. And I think that's a conclusion that, despite Connie's youth, she probably came to the same conclusion. I don't want to put
what I was going to ask, Connie, you're 20, right? You've only ever seen kind of the Blair and then post-Blair consensus. You won't remember any good politicians.
It's so strange to hear someone say how much they hate. I'm not saying, sorry, you didn't say you hated Tony Blair, but basically where all of these problems started. Because I grew up in a household where my mum has voted for both parties. She's naturally more conservative, but I was born under Tony Blair and I got a child trust fund. So when I turned 18, I got to open, 500 quid from the government. My parents didn't put money in there, but it had gained
from the taxpayer
investment. Yeah, exactly.
It's better than going to the IRA, I suppose.
Yeah, I was under the impression that, Tony Blair really did do some good things for this country, even though when I was doing my A-levels, I didn't really think devolution was a very good idea. But now looking back, I don't know, it's very strange because, yeah, I've just always grown up thinking that Tony Blair was this amazing guy. And I always thought that I would want to be more centrist when it came to voting and for what sort of government that I would want. And I always saw Keir Starmer as a centrist. And, I did consider voting Labour. And the only reason I didn't was because I didn't want them to have a massive majority, which they were predicted to have. So I was voting in Ipswich, and I knew that there was going to be a massive Labour landslide anyway in Ipswich, but I still voted Tory just in case. Not that I like Tom Hunt. I thought he was an awful Tory MP, but yeah, it was like, I remember,
like
Will, when you were at Living Freedom, and I said, it's like we're picking between, I was voting for the person that I most least wanted rather than the person that I wanted. And it was like, it's the same on the MP level as it is to do with the government as a whole. It never felt like I had a choice, and I just didn't expect it to feel like that. I was obviously very naive leading up to the first time that I was able to vote.
No, it's not naivety. It's called getting older and realizing that politicians are slimy bastards. That's
Darren, on that, and I hope I don't embarrass you, Connie, but I said to Connie privately the other day that she is literally playing out that old Churchill quote in warp speed. If you're not a liberal at the age of 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at the age of 40, you have no brain. Except she's compressed that into the space of what feels like about a year, and I'm all for it. If only more young people could come to the realization earlier, that would be wonderful, and we'd be in a much better place.
You say that, but actually, if you look at the 16 and 24 demographic in the YouGov polling, the second party that they're all voting for is Reform. So, I mean, something's happening.
Same in the US.
That's young men. That's not girls.
Yes,
that's
young men. That's true.
Yeah,
that is true.
So girls are typically who are switching away from the Uni Party are moving to the Green Party. That's their rebellion vote. Whereas boys, their rebellion vote is going to the Reform Party. So it's a very interesting trend. Young boys and young girls are moving further away from each other.
They'll all be chopping off their breasts and eating vegan sausage rolls, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm not complaining. Makes me seem more attractive compared to the rest of them. So whatever.
That's one way of looking at it.
No competition.
Paul says on Starmer, Paul says, anyone who can take hundreds of thousands in freebies and in the same week remove winter fuel payments tells you all you need to know about the man. That's a good point. And Stephen, who sent a super chat, thank you very much, Stephen. Every little helps, as we say. And was that an Asda slogan or a Tesco slogan? I can't remember. Stephen says, with the rape gangs, I think Labour are corrupt. And I think, it's instructive. As I say, all of these things are very, very instructive. And Steve has just commented saying that I'm the love child of Ant and Dec. If I had £1 for every time someone said that, I'd be a very, very wealthy man. Stephen sent another super chat. Stephen, you are in my good books tonight. He says, as a Geordie, I can only trust Geordies, and thanks to Darren, I've joined Reform. Oh, well, Stephen, I'll be telling Reform that because they'll send me a £5 in the post. No, I'm joking, they won't. Now, the other thing that was mentioned, I said there were links between Keir Starmer's government and this outrage over Gerry Adams. So just to explain what the Gerry Adams outrage actually is, the outrage that's come about today is because of plans to scrap parts of the Tories' 2023 Northern Ireland Troubles Act. This law was passed because the High Court in Northern Ireland made it so the minister that signed the piece of paper necessary as part of Gerry Adams's arrest, apparently it was the wrong minister that signed it. It wasn't the right minister, and that therefore meant that the imprisonment of Gerry Adams wasn't safe. It was no longer safe. So the Tories' 2023 Northern Ireland Troubles Act was passed to ensure that people like Gerry Adams and hundreds of horrible, hateful shites like him wouldn't get their hands on hard-earned taxpayer money. So 400 other IRA suspects detained in the 1970s were barred from claiming compensation too. Last night, Policy Exchange published a damning report from 16 members of the House of Lords, including the former Labour Security Minister Lord West, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, which of course Sir Keir Starmer is one himself. Lord MacDonald is the other one, published this letter report calling for Labour to reconsider its decision to get rid of parts of the 2023 Northern Ireland Act, the Troubles Act, I should say. Now, IRA victims have slammed the move as unacceptable, pointing out that IRA victims haven't received any compensation. How could Gerry Adams possibly get any? Eyebrows have also been raised over the fact that Labour's Attorney General, Lord Hermer, represented Gerry Adams in a damages claim back in 2023. And Guido say, meanwhile, human rights lawyer Starmer still refuses to hold a public inquiry into rape gangs. And that's the link. Hermer, I should call him Lord Hermer, has defended representing Gerry Adams in 2023, and he is under pressure to reveal whether he advised the government over the former Sinn Féin president's compensation case. Now, the Attorney General obviously has those links going back to that defence he put together for Mr. Adams in a damages claim. And Labour, in that draft order repealing the Troubles legislation, we need to know whether or not this is linked to Mr. Hermer. Robert Jenrick, who has been doing great work, and by the way, leading the charge as far as the Tories' opposition is concerned, I must say, I had my misgivings about him, a former Remainer, a former Cameroon Conservative, but he's been brilliant. I have to say, get credit where credit's due. And
Darren, do you regret backing Kemi?
I think Kemi has been disappointing. I think I would say that. I think disappointing. I
regret backing Kemi.
But she would say it's early days. She would say, well, I was going to say she would say, don't shoot you out just yet. But I don't think she would couch it in those terms. I think she would say, hang on a minute. The night is young, there's a lot of policy to be picked over, and then we'll come back. But I watched that interview on GB News the other day in which, she talked about people being peasants, and I thought, well, they were from peasant communities, the Pakistani communities that came over in the 1970s. But it's just that it just felt like an easy own goal to be like, oh, they're all peasants, because that's all she said. It was basically left at that. Anyway, I don't want to get off onto a different segue, but the move was also brought about by the likes of Hilary Benn, who is the Northern Ireland Secretary, massively anti-Brexit. And he said this underlined the government's absolute commitment to the Human Rights Act, which of course enshrined the ECHR in law under Tony Blair, which goes back to Will's point about it being incredibly relevant that the Tony Blair is responsible for all of Britain's ills. I think we do have a right to know whether or not this Lord Hermer was involved in this decision, because it makes me feel sick, and I think it will make many British people feel sick who remember the Shia Terror. Chloe,
I don't remember. I wasn't alive.
No, I know, but that's what I was about to say. And Connie, of course, obviously as well. Put yourself in the eyes of someone in the 1980s and early 90s, where you are walking around the streets of Birmingham and you don't know if someone's put a bomb in a bin or in a van that's parked up. You don't know whether or not you're going to get blown sky high by some Irish Republican who has decided...
Well, Darren, that comment from James is a really good summary right there.
Yes, it is. More than 40 bombs were exploded in London, Birmingham and Manchester. Exactly, this is the point I'm making. And other bombs were found and defused. 29 people were injured from the bombing campaign, thanks to the IRA. So will the Irish government be paying these victims' damage? Exactly, James, you are absolutely correct. The IRA victims have not had any compensation whatsoever. So to hell with it. He can go sing for his bloody supper. He's had enough from the British taxpayer through being a member of Parliament and never sitting his lazy bony arse on the seats of the House of Commons. So sod off. I despise these people. They make me sick to the pit of my stomach. And yeah, I think we have a right to know, Chloe, and that's my conclusion on the whole thing.
Look, I am no expert on the IRA and Irish matters in general, but what I really do spot here is a common theme that I'm seeing with the state, with the police, with the judiciary, is that we always seem to be now on the side of criminals rather than the victims. Completely different matter, but same theme. We've just heard in the news over the past couple of days of a Jamaican who raped a woman, but then apparently we're not going to deport him because he claims he's bisexual and that he might be, people might not be nice to him in Jamaica because he's bisexual, so we can't send him back to his country. Grooming gang perpetrators, none of Charlie Peter says that he doesn't know of a single one that has been deported. They all use the ECHR, human rights grounds and whatnot, right to a family life and all of this lot, not to be deported. You had cases where, victims asked for help and they were the ones that got arrested. I know this is a different topic, but it's the same theme that we just keep on seeing, where criminals are given better care than victims. It's just ridiculous.
Mm.
I'll add to that. I agree with everything Chloe said. I didn't know much about the Troubles either until I read possibly the best book I've read over the last decade, which was Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keith. I'm sure maybe a few people who are watching would have read that as well.
Well, I think actually will people, because on Disney Plus there is a series on that, so I think most people will have been watching that most recently, which is called Say Nothing.
Okay, I actually haven't watched the show, but I recommend everyone watches the book. But if anyone hasn't seen or read either, it is looking at
watches the book, yeah.
Watches the book, yeah. How many, blame it on the coronas, but the point is, it is looking at the history of the Troubles through one particular person that was disappeared by the IRA, and where Radden Keith gets to is it is undoubted that the mastermind of the IRA, and we all know this shit, like it's unbelievable. We all know that Gerry Adams was the mastermind of the IRA throughout the Troubles, and yet he managed to turn himself into a diplomat afterwards. But if you know that he literally directly organised the murders of thousands of United Kingdom citizens, everything Darren said is right. It should make you sick to your stomach that your money is going towards this monster. It should make you absolutely sick. It's awful. It's so awful.
It is. It really is. Right, okay. I've spent quite a lot of time there bashing Starmer, but always a fun spectator sport. Right, Gaza. From one shit show to the next. So, Gaza, there has been a deal agreed between Israel and Hamas. Donald Trump has hailed the news that an end to the war could be in sight after agreement is reached in peace talks. But hold your horses, right? Don't get your silverware out just yet, because Ben Shapiro put together a useful little summary that Will sent over. It is a hostage deal, he says, not an end of war deal. Phase 1 allows for the release of 33 hostages. It is not clear how many are alive, but some reports suggest 23. So these barbarians are obviously keeping hold of the bodies of these poor dead people who have been taken, and let's not forget there are British nationals among them. Secondly, again, the ceasefire is almost certainly temporary. It's not unlikely to end in bring a permanent end to the war. Phase 2 is, he says, highly unlikely ever to materialise, given how many hostages Hamas retains, and given that Hamas will never disarm or agree to exile. The deal does not force Israel to alter deployment along the Philadelphia corridor, border between Gaza and Egypt, which is, of course, sky high, because even Egypt say, as an Arab nation, we do not want these people in our country. And he concludes, what does all this mean? First, that some hostages will come home alive, unmitigated good. Obviously, God bless them. It would have been excellent to get more hostages, but that option was presumably unavailable given Hamas's radical intransigence and the waning health of many of the hostages. Second, that the war will continue until Hamas has no control over Gaza. Trump's nominees have said as such. So has the Israeli government. The Trump team squared this circle. The Biden team undoubtedly wanted a permanent end to the conflict as a condition of hostage release. Team Trump presumably told Hamas that that wasn't going to happen and this was the best deal they were likely to get. So that's his conclusion on that. But the question I would have here is that Chloe, President Biden will be saying, "Oh, this is part of my legacy. I've ended the Hamas war." Well, as Ben
he
says,
did a speech earlier, really
Yeah.
boasting about how amazing he is and how he's responsible for this. He said, "This is the deal I put together last spring, and now they've agreed to it." Like, it was all him, even though you've had people from all sorts of different countries negotiating over the past few days in Doha. But yeah, this deal, a lot of people are celebrating too soon. Obviously, if this does result in an end to the conflict forever, then absolutely fantastic. But I'm skeptical of that. Now, I'm seeing different reporting on exactly the details of the hostage deal, because some of the reporting is saying that in the second phase you will see every last remaining hostage sent back. The other one saying a report saying 33, I think the one you read out there. So a little bit confusing. But the thing is, right, is that if we do not have some kind of game plan for the governance of Gaza after this hostage exchange, we're just going to be back to square one. There has to be, I need to see the details of this deal. Hopefully we'll see more in the coming days of exactly what they've agreed as to what is going to happen in Gaza in terms of governance. If it's the case that Hamas are still in charge, but they've handed over a few hostages, well, they're just going to, it might take them some time because they're massively depleted, but they are just going to regroup. They're still going to treat the Palestinians in a horrible way. Remember that, it's a horrible regime to live under, regardless of whether they're fighting Israel or not. And their aim, that's in their, in their book or whatever, they're very clear that their aim is the destruction of Israel. They are not interested in, living side by side with them. They will just wait until they can commit the same atrocities again. So unless there's some kind of plan in place to have a different governance structure in Gaza, I'm not that hopeful for this deal.
No.
Well, Chloe, I think Swipe 650 is right in saying it's only a ceasefire. It'll be broken within days or weeks.
Yeah.
This is not an end to the war. And you've literally had Pete Hegseth, now I think almost inevitable future head of the Pentagon, basically saying, when he was asked, how do you see this war ending? He said, I see this war ending when every single Hamas soldier is dead. This isn't over. So I think the US is aligned there, that particularly under Trump, that this ends with every Hamas soldier being massacred, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, kill them all.
Yeah, I mean the difficulty is still, even if you
was that a Game of Thrones reference there, Darren?
I don't think
I can
so.
see
Not
the Mad
deliberately.
King.
Yeah. Or the sparrow. Connie, are you happy about the release of the hostages, or the sausages, as Shia Starmer calls them?
Well, of course, but like you were saying, Chloe, we don't know the details of this, and so we'll only know when it all plays out, and history is always going to repeat itself. Yes, this horrific period of violence might be over for a bit, like the 40 or however many days that the ceasefire actually is for officially, but who knows where we'll be in 6 months' time, let alone in 2 years' time, where, let's be honest, Israel is always going to be an outlier within the Middle East and always have to take serious measures to defend itself. It's not just Gaza that it's under threat. What's going on with Lebanon now? Do we, this is just a ceasefire between Gaza. We still don't know what's going on around other countries that border Israel. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was, if this does end the war, what the hell are university students going to talk about? I wonder what campus will look like and what the next social justice movement will be.
Yeah.
Well, somebody tweeted saying that they should all these people that have made ceasefire now their 90% of their personality over the past year, that they, given they're so dedicated to Gaza, should go out there and help rebuild the place themselves.
Well, I can do better than that, Chloe, because actually that was a comment earlier from Michael Hancock on our YouTube page, who said that the marchers, those that were on the streets marching, shouting free, free, free Palestine, should now be sent there to rebuild it. And I'm
we
sure
should specifically send everybody who is part of the Gays for Gaza movement and see how they fare.
See how they get on
out there.
Yeah,
I'm
no
sure
vegan
they'll
meals for
do
them until
fantastic.
their heads come off.
We do throw this line out on the right, all the queers for Palestine should end up going to Palestine, see what it's like, or every kind of refugee lover should actually take a refugee in their house. Has anyone on this chat actually ever heard of a situation where one of the lefties has actually followed up and done that and actually, say, taken a refugee in or actually gone to a war zone as a gay person? I'd actually be curious to know if it's ever happened.
No, but
well,
there,
I mean,
there
I've
is a
been to the Gaza
story
Strip.
of there is a story of a couple.
Well, I think you're about to turn though, Darren.
I think they were Brits.
Straight.
But they wanted to show how kind humans are and how, terrorists can't really be evil. So they went over to ISIS territory, and the two of them both got killed. So they learned their lesson.
Yeah, that's called Darwinism.
Well, actually, Chloe has had some exciting news, actually, because she released a trailer for a reality television series that she's in. What would you call it, Chloe? A reality show or a...
I'd say it's a hybrid between a documentary series and a reality show. It's a very interesting model. It's not just some boring, dull documentary. It's bloody hilarious, actually. But yeah, so I was over in Syria. I can finally now say that. I luckily did not get killed by ISIS out there like that couple did who went out there. But one thing I will say is, when I was in the Middle East, sure, I was not in Gaza and I was not in Israel, but talking to people who are closer to what is going on there, all of them were very clear. If you chatted to them about what is going on in Gaza, they were like, oh yeah, of course Hamas have done what they've done because Biden's in the White House. They all see him as just a complete plonker. He's a dead man walking, and they know that you can get away with whatever they want.
So who was this saying this, Chloe?
Just people out in the Middle East that I was talking to whilst I was
Seriously?
out there. This just seems like obvious to them. Like, yeah, of course that Hamas are doing whatever they want because Biden's in power. And I think that, Trump said, a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was, when I get to the White House, if they are still holding on to a single hostage, there will be hell. And, it was pretty much the day after Trump won the election that suddenly Hamas said that they were open to negotiations. They got scared when they saw that the Democrat show was not going to go on any longer.
Yes.
One of the things I find fascinating about the age in which we live is we've forgotten truths that our long gone ancestors worked out, whether it be how you deal with free speech issues, for example. But one of the big ones is deterrence, and generally big scary guys lead to a safer world because deterrence is achieved through strength. And when you've got kind of a weak vegetable in the presidency, then that leads to global instability. And what I think Chloe's just kind of said is that even the lowliest people in the slums of Syria understand that if you've got a vegetable leading the free world, that means that genuinely bad people can do genuinely bad things. So you can say that Trump is nasty and tweets kind of rude things, but there's no doubt in his first presidency the world was safer, and there is almost no doubt in his second presidency that the world will be safer, and we're already just seeing that through this ceasefire deal.
Yes. Catherine has written in with a very nice comment that I have to respond to. She says, I love listening to you and your guests. It gives me so much hope hearing grounded younger people who weren't alive during these atrocities but haven't adopted the woke interpretation indoctrination pushed on the masses of campus dwellers who leave rinsing and repeating. Thank you very much, Catherine. That's a very kind remark. That leads me very neatly, the comment there that Catherine makes on campus dwellers, very neatly onto this topic that Connie wanted to address. Now, Bridget Phillipson, the Telegraph reported earlier today, was set to revive free speech laws after pushback from academics. The Education Secretary was set to introduce a watered-down version of the Conservative Party legislation designed to protect university staff from cancel culture, which of course has been rampant. You say a man has a cock and a woman has a fanny, and all of a sudden you'll be cancelled from campus. So all of these things were becoming an issue, and the Tory said, enough is enough, we've got to do something about this. But Connie, she stood up at the dispatch box today, it was, and you weren't impressed by what you had to hear.
No, I mean, Bridget Phillipson continues to disappoint me and, almost surprises me every time. I just can't imagine it gets worse. I mean, the way that she acted when I think she was one of the first to come out and say, because obviously it was the Children's Safety Bill, when Labour voted against the National Inquiry, and she said, she couldn't believe how low the Tories would stoop. And once again, she is doing this gaslighting thing, trying to tell everyone that Labour, she tweeted out the most galling statement earlier saying it was under a Labour government that freedom of speech was enshrined into law, and the Labour government is once again ensuring freedom of speech will be implemented in academia. Yet the Labour's version of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, yes, it is a watered down version in the sense that it will literally mean nothing, because the watered down version is the version without clause 4, which means that the Act has no statutory tort power, which would have meant under the Tories, the one that they introduced and passed, but then the Labour government not repealed but shelved as soon as they got into power, it would have meant that individuals who were aggrieved and had their freedom of speech suppressed would have been able to take a civil case to county courts against their higher education institution. That now, not only will that not happen in the sense that it's being regulated by the Office for Students, bearing in mind the name is Office for Students, which has no statutory power, they won't even be considering complaints from students, only staff. So this bill firstly doesn't protect anyone really, but it certainly doesn't protect students, which, to be honest, they're just as likely to get cancelled, maybe even more so than academics, because we know what students are like and social ostracisation. It's students who run student unions, and that's the other thing. So firstly, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant anyway, because the Act itself doesn't have any power. But say it did have power, Bridget Phillipson has also removed the bit where it will apply to student unions as well. And that is what has been really key here, because a lot for students in particular, it's student unions, and it was in my case as well, that actually have the power and that can remove you from societies and ban you from going to certain things, which they banned me from even stepping foot into the Leeds Student Radio office.
Why? Tell viewers that might not be aware why that happened.
I started a podcast in September where I had a discussion with a detransition. I made it pretty obvious that I thought women were adult human females. And I ended up being suspended from my committee position. And my committee position was the daytime editor. So I was overseeing the talk shows, which happened to include LGBTQ Hour and Women's Hour. And I was suspended on the basis that I was accused of putting the health and safety of students at risk, which is very similar to the exact language that Bridget Phillipson used when Labour originally shelved this act. She said this could harm students because she keeps pointing to the fact that it would be a Tory hate charter. That was how Labour described it. Yet the original HEFSA would not have made hate speech legal all of a sudden. Those laws would still have existed. It just meant that universities had a legal obligation with basically a threat of legal action if they don't uphold legal speech. And the fact that I was suspended and all of this has happened because I was accused of putting the health and safety of other students at risk, it's the exact same language. And, Bridget Phillipson keeps pointing to the example of this will allow Holocaust deniers on campus to openly deny the Holocaust. How many people, I understand that denying the Holocaust is a horrific thing. I actually think it should be allowed to be
Yeah,
said.
so do I,
I'm a
actually.
free speech
Yeah,
absolutist.
yeah.
I understand that most people who are denying the Holocaust are most likely going to be horrific anti-Semites, but I
Yes,
don't
but
think
I would
that
rather
the
know
law.
that you're a
Yeah,
piece
of
of shit,
course, of
Sunlight is the
course,
best disinfectant.
of course. I completely agree. And the law should not be there to make us say that we believe that something happened, regardless of what the event was. I don't think it should. But this is the only thing she can point towards and say, we need to halt anti-Semitism on campus. The Labour, I'm sorry, maybe Bridget Phillipson herself, but since when have we cared about anti-Semitism on campus? We've
Well,
seen
the
what's happened,
Labour
as we were
Party.
talking about. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen what's happened with the pro-Palestinian camps and, Dr. Philip, I forget how to pronounce his last name, Kaisley.
Yeah, yeah,
You know who I mean?
yeah.
He was a professor at the or was a professor at the University of Leeds. There was a literal witch hunt. There were posters of his face up
Kissely,
around
isn't it? Is it
university.
Kissely?
It was,
Anyway, yeah.
yes, yeah, something like that. I can't remember if it was his face or someone else, because it's happened to at least 2 different members of staff. Because we had a rabbi who went back to Israel to fight for the IDF, and then something happened where he describes it as a Islamist campaign against him. But one of the two, there were posters around uni with their face on saying, "We are not safe on campus." Though, and when Michael Gove was announcing the new definition of extremism a few months ago, the first example of anti-Semitism he gave was on Leeds campus, and all of a sudden, the Labour Party are talking about making sure that campuses don't have anti-Semitism on to sort of stop this freedom of speech bill. I mean, I just find it so disingenuous. And even the Lib Dem spokesperson at the debate in Parliament said that he welcomed not only the fact that it wasn't going to be this Tory hate charter anymore, but he welcomed the fact that student unions were not being made to uphold freedom of speech. And then he said, will the Prime Minister commit to protecting vulnerable minorities on campus?
Oh, for God's sake.
I have been fuming all day about it, and
I mean, you're a
it's
hero for what you've
really
been highlighting, and clearly highlighting that there is a significant issue on campuses. So thank you for doing that and for raising this as a topic. I genuinely think that they couldn't give a hoot because this is Labour ideology. I mean, let's not forget that they've just locked up a whole load of people for making comments online.
This is not because the Labour government cares about freedom of speech. They are under a lot of pressure. I mean, I think the theory is that Bridget Phillipson thought that she could brush this under the carpet when she originally shelved it. And then some academics, almost 700 academics, including some very highly esteemed academics, including Richard Dawkins, have signed this open letter to her. So she's under a lot of pressure from them, but also universities themselves are lobbying against this clause 4, which would give the HEFSA statutory power, because universities are so strapped for cash, they literally cannot afford the risk of having to pay for litigation if someone brings a civil case against them. And the other thing as well is because universities rely so much on the fees of international students, almost a fifth of which come from China. They don't want to risk putting Chinese students off coming, because obviously, I mean, from my experience of hearing stories about, I don't know if this is a common thing, but I only learned this, that literally university campuses are the CCP's eyes and ears in the UK.
Yeah. Well, that was rumoured to be why they were getting rid of the legislation in the first place.
Well, yes. So there are those rumours, but also universities, it's not just the government, but universities themselves don't want to risk putting off Chinese students who may or may not be in favour of the CCP. I mean, I've heard stories of, this kind of off topic, but the extent of which it doesn't just affect us as British citizens, but Chinese students themselves. It tends to be the case at most universities that international students, particularly Chinese students, will become very sort of, they stick within themselves. They don't integrate that well with the rest of the student body. But even between themselves, they don't know whether each other are on the side of the CCP. So they can't, their own English might not be very good. So then they don't, even people who speak their own first language, they're not sure who they can speak to honestly about. And then last year as well, there was this thing where we were being handed leaflets around campus about what to do if you get a message saying that, your family, there had been circumstances of international students, particularly Chinese students, being told, if you don't tie yourself up and take photos and pretend that you've been kidnapped, then something really bad is going to happen to your family. But they've also told their family that the photos they've been sent are real, and that in order to be freed, they have to send them a load of money. We were being handed leaflets around campus in the student union about this. I mean, the tentacles they're everywhere, and it's all
very much
it's
so.
all very scary. But at the end of the day, obviously the Labour government doesn't care about freedom of speech, and I just cannot stand Bridget Phillipson, and it's.
The Chinese don't want discussions over issues like Hong Kong on university campuses in Britain, right? That's one of the reasons. So they put pressure on the government to get rid of it. But right, brief remarks from Will and Chloe because on this issue, if there are any, because Chloe's going to kill me if I go over too long.
I mean, Bridget Phillipson, when she stood at the dispatch box, she started off with the lines, along the lines of, this government is a staunch defender of free speech and academic freedom. And as soon as she said that, I was like, right, I'm not going to trust anything you say in the rest of your speech.
How can they say those words?
They just can't say that. And I mean, Connie, you've obviously looked at this, a lot more than I have. But one thing I really wanted to pick up on was what you mentioned about student unions. I didn't realize that this was taking accountability away from student unions.
And student unions have never had accountability. So the whole point, we were hoping that with the Tory version, that it would include, so because universities as institutions are held to a slightly higher standard already, as far as I understand it, but the HEFSA originally was going to make sure that student unions and universities were held to a very high standard and had this sort of threat of legal action that individuals would have the right to. So it hasn't been removed, it has just never been implemented. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, yes, that makes more sense. Student unions, they are run by students, and my experience at university was that the students were a greater threat to my freedom of speech than any of the academics or any of the staff. I know some other universities have woke staff, but at least in my case, they were all fairly reasonable. It was the absolutely bonkers lefty students that have got nothing better to do because they barely do their uni work, where they're not required like a normal job to turn up 9 to 5. They just sit on their bums tweeting and writing Facebook posts all day about how everyone who disagrees with them is evil and needs to be removed from every society that they're a part of and banished and whatnot. The students are absolutely nuts, and that was very clear to me when we had Kathleen Stock, the gender critical feminist, came to speak at the Oxford Union. The Oxford Union, which is the debating chamber, not the student union, they wanted to host her. The student union, run by these nutcase students, and you get the worst of them running the SU, trust me, they were demanding that the event be shut down and said that they will pull their funding out of the Oxford Union if they dare to platform a woman who just says that guys in frocks shouldn't be in women's changing rooms and prisons. How insane is that? And they were vicious. They led a campaign for weeks and months to try and shut down the Oxford Union for having the audacity to platform a gender critical feminist. It is absolutely crazy. On campus.
That girl in that protest when Kathleen Stock went to the Oxford Union, the one who sat down and glued her hands to the floor with the t-shirt
I know, I was there, and we had to pause the event for half an hour waiting for her to be unglued.
She was the year above me at school, so we had the same secondary school education.
Oh God,
and
poor
we've
you.
both gone very different ways, clearly.
Yeah, as in you're not totally mad.
Absolutely hilarious.
Will, any brief thoughts on that?
How long do I have, Darren? What, 30 seconds?
Yeah.
I don't blame the left. I don't blame Labor. Lefties are always going to be nuts. I blame the right. I blame the right in the UK. I blame the right in Australia. I blame the right in the US. We've forgotten how to argue for free speech. You know, there is that the left has won. Even before, when this panel was having a debate going, oh, yeah, you should be allowed to call someone, you know, this word or that word. Oh, that's a good idea. It's like, we worked this out 2,000 years ago. You should be allowed to say what you want to say with some very limited exceptions. If it incites violence or if it's defamatory, the right has forgotten that. The left are always going to be bonkers. The one thing I would just suggest to everyone who is here today is get up and have the guts to actually fight for free speech. I'm actually not sure the Conservatives in this country have those guts, but we need to remember that it is us on the right that is fighting for this. And I think we're the ones who need to take accountability to say, right, you should be allowed to say what you want to say, with some very, very limited exceptions. Let's stop whinging about the left and let's actually start actually fighting for free speech again.
Yes. All right. Chloe, this was the story that you wanted to discuss. So earlier today...
Oh, we're still going.
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah. No, yes, we've got one more story to do. That's why I was saying we need to rush through that one. Chloe picked this out, and someone called Elon Musk.
You picked it out and tweeted it, and
yes.
and then someone called Elon Musk tweeted it.
Someone called Elon Musk shared this tweet from someone called Darren Grimes, never heard of him. And Elon Musk says the only reason to ban voter ID is to commit voting fraud. Same blue playbook there as in here, which is obviously the United States of America. And it was from this tweet that I had posted in which I said... Keir Starmer's Labour are dropping voter ID laws, meaning your parcel at the post office is more secure than your vote, giving millions of foreigners the right to vote and allowing children to vote too. Make no mistake, this is a blatant attempt to keep them in power. And I said it was chilling. And just to give you a very brief overview, this is all part of first of all, you've got the abolition of voter ID that the Tories passed. You've got millions of foreign nationals being added into the franchise, so they will get a vote, and also votes at 16 and 17, of course. That adds 700,000 young people, which primarily vote for the Labour Party. And this is all ahead of course, elections being cancelled in May because councils are being expanded, basically merged into unitary authorities, bigger authorities, to actually ensure, because apparently there are in certain wards, in certain councils, there aren't enough council taxpayers, so you can't pay social care bills. So the idea is that you expand them, and that way you can. But that, to me, actually just dilutes democracy, and I'm not sure that's good. I think power, where it can be, ought to be devolved as close to the individual as possible. But that's a separate debate. And anyway, I see this as deeply anti-democratic, and I see this as an attempt for Labour to rig the next election because they're going to do very poorly. I do. And Elon Musk agreed.
It sounds. Look, I know that this is in the Daily Mail, and to say they're going to rig the election sounds like a big splashy title. But I genuinely think that is what they are trying to do. I completely agree with Elon that the only reason why you would want to get rid of voter ID is so that you can commit voter fraud. We've got enough of a problem as it is with postal votes in this country causing problems. We've got faith in democracy at pretty much all-time low in this country because people keep on asking their politicians for things and they just do not deliver for them. It feels like going to the ballot box is almost pointless. We ask for lower immigration, for example, time and time again. Never happens. Ask for lower taxes time and time again. Never happens. And then, if they do this as well, it is just going to be a complete slap in the face to the British public. And, why my suggestion to Keir Starmer is why don't you win over the public and win an election by actually doing a good job, by actually sorting out the mess in this country, rather than thinking, "Oh God, we're doing bad in the polls. Let's just rig it." And it's three different things going on here. And if you look at the numbers, I think it could actually have quite a significant effect on the electoral prospects, because it's not just the voter ID thing; it's 5 million foreign nationals being given the vote. That is a huge number, which could have a significant impact on their electoral prospects. And they're all going to vote for Labour, let's be honest, most of them at least. And then you've got kids being given the vote, and I think it says in that article 700,000 each year will be added to the electorate as a consequence of that. And we know that young people predominantly vote for the Labour Party. This is obviously massively going to work in their favour, and I think it's absolutely appalling. And I think it goes back into what we were saying earlier, in that Keir Starmer is, I think this shows him to be quite a nasty individual. He is willing to completely undermine democracy in order to suit himself.
Exactly.
If I was a politician, no matter how desperately I wanted to be Prime Minister, I would never rig an election for my own gain.
Can I just check
on Brexit? You see that on Brexit, what he did on Brexit. You see that on the way in which he lied to the Labour membership in order to win the party nomination for the leadership. You see that in the fact that he lied in his general election manifesto. He lied to British farmers, saying that he wouldn't come after them. He lied to pensioners, saying he wouldn't come after them. The man is a compulsive liar, so I have absolutely no doubt that this is him rigging the system, because he doesn't trust the ballot box. He is a technocrat. That's why he loves Brussels so much, because he likes power being removed from people, not actually people taking back control. And that's a slogan he started to use, the menacing little shit. Anyway, Connie, sorry.
Can I just check that? So before the Tories introduced voter ID, which I am in favour for, when you turn up to a polling station, you have to tell the person your address and they tick you off a list. That's what happens?
Yeah, your name, and then they'll ask your address. Yeah.
Okay, so would that mean that these 5 million foreign nationals, assuming they all have addresses, they're just not a British citizen yet, they have somewhere where they live, why would their addresses be on the list if we...
Yeah, to be clear, I can actually already vote in a UK election, and I'm not a UK citizen.
Yeah. No, well, yeah, but I think this is EU citizens and all these other... every other.
I know Australians are the good ones. I get that, but this is like I think it is actually outrageous that
Australians that are in this country are not good. They tend to be very left wing.
It's Commonwealth. It's Commonwealth. So if you're a British citizen or a Commonwealth citizen, then you are allowed to vote. If you're a foreign national of any other type, then you are not allowed to vote. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg says in that article, he says he doesn't think that. He thinks that the Commonwealth rule is outdated and we shouldn't let people.
I agree.
To be clear, I don't think I should be allowed to vote in a UK election. I'm not a citizen of your country. Of course I shouldn't be allowed. I think this is absolutely wrong, this measure, but there is already a problem here where I can be in your country and vote for your government. And I think it goes
agree with
to this...
Jacob Rees-Mogg that Commonwealth rule is a little bit outdated. But I think just going back to what Connie was saying, I think Connie was a bit confused in that this issue about voter ID is separate to them saying they're going to allow foreign nationals to now vote in this country. We're not saying that by getting rid of voter ID, suddenly 5 million people are going to turn up to the voting booth without ID, those being foreign nationals. These are there are 3 different things they're doing. 1, get rid of voter ID. 2, allow foreign nationals to vote, and 3, allow 16 to 17-year-olds. So they're
explicitly saying that foreign nationals will be able to vote?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I did not
They already
realise
can.
that. Because I'm not...
5 million of them.
Not all of them.
Getting rid of... Oh, sorry.
I
genuinely thought you just meant that if we got rid of voter ID, this would allow foreign nationals to vote because we didn't have a secure enough system. But that is...
Foreign nationals can already vote.
From the Commonwealth.
Commonwealth ones.
Yes, guys, but that is still a foreign national by definition. I know I'm the nice kind of white, kind of good type of foreign national, but guys, it's already happening. And it goes to this sort of identity crisis this country has where, again, I feel like occasionally in this country, I'm the one who is defending what is, I think, at least once, the greatest country in human history. And it is a country which has lost confidence in itself. It says, oh, well, okay, we'll let these sorts of people who maybe kind of live in Tuvalu or live in, Nauru or whatever other kind of Commonwealth kind of, little outposts can vote for us. This is a country that has lost faith in itself. And this is coming from an Australian. I still want to beat you in the ashes and all that stuff, but you have lost faith in yourself as a country, and we need to get that confidence back, or else this country is not going to rediscover it. And that is terrifying to me, let alone to someone who is a British citizen.
Yeah, we need to take away the votes of foreigners. I think we can all agree on that. Case,
the thing is, if you talk to people who are a little bit out, they step outside the bubble for a minute, they see it. Will sees it. When I talk to Americans, they all see it. They're like, "What are you guys doing to your country?" But some people who are just, they're here and they're wrapped up in it all. They don't quite realise what's happening.
How do I pronounce this? Is it Curse 10 on YouTube?
Probably short for Kirsty.
Curse. Oh, is it Kirsty? Sent £20 in a super chat and thanks me for raising money for Lieutenant Colonel Mark Teaton, who was, of course, stabbed last year near Brompton Barracks. And the trial starts on January the 20th. And we at Reasoned will do more on that coverage and cover that, because I think what happens is this horrible cycle where these things happen and then they're never spoken about again, and the trials take so long that we're forgetting about them. Foggy has a question for the Australian. Why is Sky News in Australia so much better than the UK? You don't need the Australian to answer that question. I can answer that for you. I'm on Sky News Australia in about an hour's time. And the answer is because they're not regulated. They can say whatever the hell they want. They don't have an Ofcom. They can chat as freely as all of us have spoken, as freely as we've been able to. I've sworn, I've done whatever I want. I'm not saying it's a nice thing to be able to swear, but to just say something without having to balance it with some psychotic leftist, that's they don't have to do that. So that's why it's better. It's pretty simple, really. Right, okay. Just to leave everyone on a completely depressing note, Westminster Council, if you're looking for a job, Westminster Council are hiring right now an executive assistant, and you get between £54,000 and £64,000 working in Westminster, nice part of the world, or at least it used to be.
Only 36 hours.
Yeah, only 36 hours.
Servant job.
Yeah, pretty good money. And then let's have a look at the specifications for this job, shall we? Right. So the council is committed to achieving diverse shortlists to support our desire to increase the number of staff from underrepresented groups in the workforce. We especially encourage applications from a global majority. People who are Black, Asian, Brown, dual heritage, Indigenous to the global South, and or have been racialized as ethnic minorities. I don't understand. Formerly known as Black and minority ethnic background. And while the role is open to all applicants, we will utilise the positive action provisions of the Equality Act 2010 to appoint a candidate from a global majority background where there is a choice between two candidates of equal merit. If you are from a global majority background, you can self-declare this to the hiring manager as part of our positive action commitments. So basically, fellas, if you fancy yourself 54 grand from Westminster Council for working 36 hours a week as an executive assistant, probably sat on your ass, drinking a cup of coffee, eating a donut at your desk. Well, if you're white, sod off is the answer to that. If you're part of the global majority, because they like to remind us all that you whiteys, you're actually the minority, you horrible, inherently racist beasts, well, there's no point applying. No point applying at all. And this is in law. They get away with it in law. And the Tories did that. So I just wanted to end on that highlight. On that complete depressing.
The thing that annoys me the most is the term global majority. I mean, how insane have we become where even the phrase ethnic minority is now too triggering.
Exactly.
They've changed the language that they came up themselves with in the first place. Ethnic minority is too triggering, and we've got to change it to global majority. I mean, come on, get a grip. These people need a life. Clearly,
Yeah.
It's like they
36
came up
hours isn't enough for them because they got time for this crap.
Well, they came up with woke as well, and then now they're kind of trying to disown that at a million miles an hour as well.
Yeah. I mean, Connie, are you excited to leave university and go into the job market as a white
I guess
person?
Chloe and I have a bit of an advantage over
Oh, you're a woman.
you and Will. I mean, at
Yeah.
least you're gay, Darren.
Yeah.
You got
Well,
that.
I'm literally the bottom,
I'm the wrong
straight,
kind of
white,
gay.
privately
Yeah.
educated male. Yeah.
yeah, you're not.
So-
I went to a state comprehensive, so I've got that as well. Box ticked.
I feel like I am, as much as I despise the Tory government for what they did, especially, I mean, the worst part of it being Theresa May trying to introduce self ID, and thank God
that
for
was bad.
Brexit, because without it, that actually probably would have been passed sort of under the table, as the majority of self ID laws do.
You're welcome.
I don't know if this is me just being too soft on myself, but because what I know what it's like to believe in that stuff. I mean, to be fair, I was a child, when I was 16, when I believed in all of that stuff. I feel like people who do that genuinely think that they're doing the right thing. And clearly there has been a huge shift in the Conservative Party, and Kemi Badenoch can see how all of that was wrong, and that's why I really liked her as a leader, because she was a woman of an ethnic minority in this country who can call all of it out. And I think I don't hate the Tories as much as I imagine that you do,
think
Darren.
it's well, I would, but I just to give you a brief explanation on that. I campaigned heart and soul for the Conservatives both in 2017 and in 2019, and my heart was in it both times. They were accessing communities that I felt had been ignored and sidelined in the so-called Red Wall up here in the likes of County Durham and all the rest of it. In 2019, I cried when Concert, where I was born, went blue for the first time ever in its history. And the Tories betrayed that vote. They just messed everything up. So I find it hard to forgive and forget in that unique example. All for Christian charity and forgiveness, but I draw the line at being taken for a mug not once but twice. So, that's my explanation and rationale behind that one. But I would say that this here is racism that was put in place by the Conservative Party.
Of course. Yes, but obviously, like the civil service, it is a civil service job. They're public servants.
Well,
So
Stephen says conservative my arse, by the way. So, and Stephen is never wrong. He'll tell you.
The thing is, at the time they were trying to fight this nasty party, and Theresa May was trying to fight that, we're not the nasty party. So they were trying to bring some woke stuff in to make them seem, I know that's very obvious, but I understand why they did it. I just don't think they ever realised the extent of how ridiculous it all was.
We all understand why they did it, but they didn't have the courage or the capacity to be able to make the alternative argument. Like, do you think Margaret Thatcher would have caved?
No.
Of course she wouldn't. She would have said,
no.
There is an alternative way, and she would have had the strength and the fortitude not to just cave to the vicissitudes of the moment, and she would have said, this is how the world should work. I don't think it is, well, we need to have, kind of sympathy for the Conservatives because the way the world was going meant they had to fall in line. We need to say, you need to do better because your party, your strand of conservatism has done better before. Your country has done better before. Like, go, like Connie, do what I do when I'm hungover and just go watch Margaret Thatcher YouTube clips and just like the best Sunday morning you'll ever have.
Point, but we also have to remember that
we can do better.
Massively on the other end of the spectrum with Section 28, and I know people make that comparison, and it's not the same thing. But Section 28 was also awful. So I think to compare to compare
What's
the two
happened in
is
schools,
very
though, Connie,
different.
since then? Not teaching. So the idea of not teaching homosexual relationships in schools, well, it's gone the other way now, and you can learn about anal sex at school.
Of
I
course,
don't
but
think that's
neither is
appropriate.
good. It doesn't mean that they're both that one is good and one isn't. I just think it's unfair to compare Margaret Thatcher to what Theresa May was, or even David Cameron was having to deal with.
Oh God,
Why?
it's a bloody waste of skin.
Margaret Thatcher had a Cold War to deal with. I'm sorry, we all have our challenges.
Yeah. James says, by the way, that we should all play them at their own game and identify as a black female lesbian, and we'll be CEO in no time. So that's a good. I might apply for Westminster City Council and apply for the executive assistant position.
Well, funnily enough, Darren, I often see on Twitter these days, like kind of these posts coming up of my dream team political party. And it's often Farage at the top. But I've seen a couple of tweets recently of a Darren Grimes as a deputy leader of a future reform party. So I'm going to
going to say of Westminster Council.
Yeah, I think there are bigger ambitions here for the 125 people in attendance. Do you have political ambitions? And when are we going to launch this political campaign?
I would love to serve my country in any way that I can.
Well, someone asked us in the comments.
He's a politician already.
The Reason podcast are going to start our own party.
Yeah,
I think we've got enough parties as it is, guys.
The Reasoned Party. There we are. Right. Okay. Stephen says there's a bit of conflict tonight. That's new. Well, we like a little bit of a discussion. We're free speech here, Stephen, as you know. Kamashi, how do I say that? Kamiashi says Margaret Thatcher would eat the current government for breakfast and then turn to something else without debate. You're absolutely right, she would. A woman after my own heart. I would have loved to have met her. Right, okay. We're going to call it a night now because, as Stephen mentioned earlier, and I keep mentioning Stephen, this is like my grumpy granddad, Stephen is. For those that watch the Saturday 5, I always read out posts on the GB News forum from Grumpy Grandad, and I always mention Stephen on this recording every week. But Stephen said we've got to let Chloe go on time because we don't want her dog to end up pissing itself again. So on that note, I think we better call it a night. Thank you very much to good dog. He's not desperate for a waz. Connie, thank you very much. Good luck in applying for your Westminster City Council executive assistant position as a trans lesbian. Will, good luck continuing to be the stoic, upright, standing Willie that you are. And Chloe Dobbs, good luck being, well, a Channel 4 leftist, because that's what you're going to be forever known as.
I'm not a leftist.
Well, we'll see what if you've disgraced yourself in this documentary. For all I know, you might have come out and said, "Let's bring Abdul to Britain. Let's bring Abdul to Britain." Other names are available, of course. Remo
Mohammed's
says
the number one baby name in Germany now.
well, yeah. Remo says, what dog you got, Chloe? He's a cocker, isn't he, Chloe?
We'll bring him in. Come here, buddy. He's fast asleep, bless him. Oh, my camera's moved. He's going to say hello before we end the podcast. I've woken him up just to show Remo.
Oh, he's beautiful. Beautiful. What's his name?
Brody,
that's a nice name. Oh, bless you, Brody. But James says, it's been a pleasure tonight. We need more of these and everyone to take action to better the United Kingdom. Only Reform UK can do that. Good night, all. Well, on that party political broadcast, we'll end it there. Have a good night.
Adios.
Thank you very much to each of you. Adios, amigos. And see you same time next week. Do consider sharing, subscribing, liking, getting involved in supporting Reasoned any way you can, because every little really does help. And Darren has lost his end screen again. There it is. Good night.